the chamber this week, we're talking about the Old West. Cowboys, robot cowboys, Mario, and we're going to be building a brand new world on this episode of Fandom Roulette. Hey everyone, welcome back to an episode of Fandom Roulette. My name's Joe.
And I'm Cody.
So hey Cody, what nerdy stuff have you been up to this week?
Well, I finally got Destiny 2, so I've been playing a lot of that.
Oh.
However, Super Mario Odyssey came out as well, so
what?
We'll be diving deep into that. But
how do you have the time?
Well, I make do. We don't talk about sleep around here.
What? I sleep all the time. I love sleep.
Oh, I used to love sleep, but I also love Destiny 2.
Okay, fair enough.
But yeah, it's been good for the kind of small review of it. If you like Destiny 1, you'll love Destiny 2. If you weren't a fan of Destiny 1, you might as well skip over this one.
Have you been going on raids?
No, we were gonna do a raid last night, but our whole group fell apart. It's we could have a whole episode on the intricacies of Destiny on the end game level, but it just falls apart.
The end game level. Yeah,
so it's a concept that's been it's been a huge thing in the MMO world, the MMORPG, like World of Warcraft, EverQuest, those kinds of games.
I'm familiar.
Where the game so you go through kind of a campaign-y sort of situation. You play the game, and then you kind of beaten the story, and then they have what's called end game, which is you're kind of max level, but there's still stuff to do.
Okay.
So that's kind of where the raids fall in. Like, technically the story, I've completed the story that they have in the game right now.
I guess that was my question.
Yeah.
So how much story is there?
I was able to get through the campaign in about a week and a half, on and off. Okay. So it wasn't super long.
Okay.
But a lot of the big chunk of the game is through kind of the PvP and then, doing the raid and doing the end game stuff.
Sure.
And what have you been up to?
So I saw Thor Ragnarok, which
I did too.
Ragnar was awesome.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it might be my new favorite Marvel movie.
Cool.
It did a lot of stuff that I was really excited about in a lot of different directions, which was eloquent Hulk. Or not eloquent, but talking Hulk, got him back. Just the style of everything was really neat. And I've been watching a lot of stuff about the director talking about various things, and he was saying in the art design they were very much going for as much of a Jack Kirby style as possible, and you can really tell based on Jack Kirby just loved weird angular lines and amazing spaceship designs and all of this different stuff, and I had a grand time. It was a lot of fun. It was very funny without necessarily negating anything that makes Thor awesome, and I think in a lot of ways he might be a lot of people's favorite Avenger after this one, which I think is pretty cool.
For sure.
But, I always liked the Thor movies, while acknowledging that they probably aren't the best of the solo outings. But this one, yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I feel it transitioned back into a really exciting and entertaining comic experience. It was like watching a comic book on screen.
Nice.
But yeah, so after the Halloween episode we did, which utilizes a kind of fan the hammer style approach to the podcast, we decided that we both really liked it, and we're going to try it out again for a few more episodes. So I know a couple of the early episodes we put out there were longer form, almost a full hour of content about one specific topic. And we realized that we burned through a lot of potentially really interesting stuff in those longer form episodes. So we're gonna try a little bit more of thematic for a couple of weeks and see how those work out. And this week I wanted at least to talk about some Old West stuff.
Hell yeah!
Because the Old West was fun. And this morning I woke up and I fell asleep with music on. And when I woke up, it was playing the Westworld soundtrack. And I was like, oh man, I love the Old West. Because I love Westworld. And I was like, maybe we should do an episode about the Old West. So where would you like to begin?
Oh, boy, I don't know. You're putting me on the spot.
Yeah.
Why don't we start with Cowboys? Let's just start back and let's do what we did for Halloween. Let's start with the history part.
Sure.
Let's talk about Cowboys.
Yeah, so I feel like Cowboys, like a lot of things that have kind of become popular and pervasive in nerd culture, have a lot of mythology associated with it, which, I think is kind of inevitable, because I think we all really love the idea of mythology and mythos and things like that. And Cowboys are no exception. If anyone has read the Dark Tower series by Stephen King, if you read articles and essays that he's written about it, he kind of argued that the cowboy was kind of like the America's answer to the Knights of the Round Table and knights and things like that. They had their own... It's something that's distinctly American. It's something that has a little bit of mythology associated with it. And, there's kind of like a weird idealism to it, where these were rugged individualists who were moving out into an area that they weren't aware of and living on your own and kind of, in some cases, turning your back on society. One of the things I think is kind of interesting is a lot of times our ideas of this are conflated with the similar idea of, like, the gunslinger and, like, the lawman, which are kind of two separate entities.
Right.
But, when you think of cowboys, you think of hats, those cowboy hats.
Yeah.
You think of gun belts, maybe a Bowie knife or two, riding on horseback across open plains, lassos, all these things. But, like a lot of things, cowboy was just kind of like a job. Because... as people were expanding west, so this was during the period of Western expansion, right around the end of the Civil War, and there's lots of not super great stuff about this. It's new Western expansion at the cost of a lot of indigenous peoples, who at that point we had already displaced once or twice, depending on where you were. But you had wide open spaces with lots of land and lots of good grazing land for, cattle, which during this time cattle were a huge industry.
Right.
You got your steers for food, you got your dairy cows for making more cows and for, producing milk and things like that, and you had all these wide open spaces, and so you just kind of let your cows go crazy. But because you had these, these basically giant forms of money, people would try to steal them and things like that. So, in one level, cowboys were designed to, be like protection, basically, and they were also designed to, move animals into the cities to get your money and things like that, because these ranches tended to be kind of isolated. But the idea of cowboys goes as far back as, Spain, medieval Spain and things like that.
Oh, okay.
And, like anything else, it kind of moved over to the New World, which isn't surprising when you consider that a lot of quote-unquote cowboy cultures started in more Spanish colonies. So, like Texas, Florida, the California region, things like that. And so, these people were kind of just doing their jobs and things like that. And over time, too, you start seeing conflicts as well between, the cowboys and people who are trying to put up fences and things like that, because it was kind of taking away their jobs. But it's a regional thing, depending on what your cowboy looks like. So when you think of the cowboy hats with the lassos and things like that, that was very much like a Texas cowboy. In Florida, they tended to have whips and giant poles to kind of corral the animals. And over time, this mythology of cowboys starts coming into play thanks to Wild West shows, which were early forms of entertainment. In a lot of cases, they were alternatives to circuses, but they would tell stories. It was these people who would go into big cities, and there would be various levels of things. So you'd watch a cowboy catch and ride a bucking bronco, which is kind of a rodeo thing now too. Okay. You have shooting demonstrations and sharpshooters and things like that. So one of the most famous sharpshooters was, of course, Annie Oakley. Yeah. So there you have an extra fun of it's a woman from the frontier who could shoot better than the boys. Ooh. Kind of deal. And yeah, it was telling stories about conflicts with the Indians. And
that's so mean.
It was like anything else, just a sort of an idealized way of presenting something that was kind of happening on the fringes of society. Because when people talk about the Wild West, that wasn't necessarily a wrong term, you know? You have large populations of people moving out to what essentially was a lawless area, either A, trying to figure it out on their own to establish laws or things like that, and B, tended to be primarily young men.
Okay.
So you had these large populations of young men trying to get rich and kind of getting in conflict with one another and things like that.
Okay.
So from this arises the need for lawmen, which take cowboys, you take lawmen, kind of squish them together, and then you get your modern day idea of what a cowboy is. So a lot of times when we're watching, Old West movies, cowboys tend to be lone riders, riding, and also defending the West from lawless banditos, or themselves being lawless banditos sometimes. Because it much like pirates, it was one of those deals where it was kind of two sides of the coin, where you would have either cowboys being noble defenders of the innocent, or sometimes you have cowboys, being jerks, but noble jerks.
Noble jerks.
That. Yeah, for sure. And, I think it's really interesting because a lot of our notions of cowboys, once again, come from Hollywood films.
Right.
And in an even more interesting twist, a lot of our most famous cowboy films are from, Italy.
Huh, okay.
So have you ever heard of the phrase spaghetti western?
Yeah.
Yeah, there is this Italian producer named Sergio Leone who's absolutely obsessed with the Old West.
Okay.
And things like that. And so, he produced the Dollars trilogy, which is For a Fistful of Dollars, For a Few Dollars More, and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah, I know that one.
Which all star Clint Eastwood.
Yeah.
And 2 of the 3 star Lee Von Cleef. And yeah, these ideas of white hat and black, well, that was like an Old West, or that was like a black and white film thing. But a lot of these ideas of black hat, white hat, there was a mythology that was kind of built into it. It was easy visual indications of who was the good guy and who was the bad guy. And in reality, let's be real, good guys probably didn't wear white hats and bad guys probably didn't wear black hats. They probably just wore whatever hats they could find. Things like that. But yeah, it's interesting because these people were just, riding horses and trying to keep cattle in line and moving them to different pastures, things like that. It was often people just trying to, make a quick buck and do all right financially. But I think there's some noble stuff about it, Yeah. It was once again people, moving to the frontier to, try to make it big. I don't know if you're ever going to be able to do that as a cowboy, but the pay was good from the sounds of the pay was better from the sounds of it. A lot of times you were given, housing or food and home housing, things like that. And so for a lot of people living out west, it on one level represented adventure, and on the other level it represented an opportunity because cities were growing rapidly. And so for a lot of reasons why people started moving over to the New World, people started moving west. They wanted land, they wanted their own opportunities, things like that.
Cool.
So yeah.
So we have a lot of cowboy pop culture stuff.
Sure.
Westworld, which we'll talk about a little later, definitely one of the big ones. What is kind of the biggest thing you see amongst pop culture cowboy stuff that's totally super wrong, just out of the gate bullshit?
I would say, I guess, a couple of things that I would think of. The black hat, white hat thing.
Right.
But like I said, that was a very easy visual shorthand.
Yeah, it was a cinema trick.
Yeah, especially in black and white silent films.
Right.
When you were trying to, through basically just the moving image, show who was the good guy, who was the bad guy. In that case, I think the depiction of, cowboys riding around, with lassos, swinging over their heads, that was completely a regional thing, and it makes sense too, because if you're in Texas, you have big plains and things like that, and so it would make sense that you would have a tool that could reach far,
right,
to catch things. And then, gosh, I don't know enough about this, but they always have really nice guns.
Yeah,
chances are people
slick 6-shooters.
Pretty sure a lot of people probably. Well, I guess it depends on the make and model and things like that, but who knows what kind of guns they would actually be using. I'm sure there would be a little bit more variety of guns than 6-shooters. Though, if you're on the back of a horse, the 6-shooter is probably your easiest bet for weaponry,
right,
and things like that, because it's a lot easier to shoot with a pistol because you have one hand on the rein, one hand on the gun.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I think I know the answer to this one.
Sure.
Granted, it's been a long time since I've had a class on the subject.
Yeah.
But how often did we see those the duels? The duel at dawn.
Oh, like high noon.
Yeah, the high
like
noon
that.
shootouts and things like that.
So I'm pretty sure at this time, duel culture was starting to become exceedingly more illegal. But as I also pointed out, you're living out west. You didn't have a lot of laws to be enforced, things like that. I know the most famous one that did actually happen was there was a big shootout at the OK Corral.
Okay.
With Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp and those people. And so Wyatt Earp was the lawman. Doc Holliday was just a doctor who happened to be his friend, things like that. There was a fairly extensive shootout. One of the ones I know of that was a big one was in, I think it was Deadwood, South Dakota.
Okay.
Oh God, I could be wrong about that. If I'm wrong, I'll issue a redaction at the next time. But there's a famous instance there of the dead man's hand.
Okay.
Which I believe was 5 aces. It was. Let's just put it this way: the man threw down a hand that you couldn't have without cheating, and was shot right there in the saloon.
Wow. Well, I mean, he cheated.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the other thing too, right?
Also, I don't justify murder because you cheated on a hand of poker.
Yes. Yeah, let's just put this out there. In today's day and age, that would not be okay. Well, it would not be okay. Who knows what happens behind the scenes in Vegas? I guess there's nothing to stop you from getting beat up a bunch.
Sure, I mean, Oof.
I do not condone murder for cheating at poker either. Just let the record show.
Yes, these fandom casters do not condone shootouts.
Yes, no shootouts,
please.
And I'm assuming if this was a TV show, like the more you know, like Rainbow would come across the screen.
Yeah,
it was like, don't murder. Joe and Cody say, don't murder. Ding 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 ding. Yeah, and so it's kind of it's interesting to me. Because I feel like they haven't gotten the same level of mythology as pirates have gotten. But it's still there. And, it's true, too, where you do have some cowboy... I feel cowboy stories are very easy to manipulate to be anything you want them to be. Because you have, like, cowboy stories that are treasure hunts.
Yeah.
Treasure of the Sierra Madres. You got, like, movies like Deadwood and High Noon, which is, like, the lawmen fighting a vicious gang of thugs. You have The Magnificent Seven, which I might go on record and say is like my favorite Western. I think there's just something about it. And that one's based on a Kurosawa film. So that one was basically just someone took a Japanese film and moved it to the American West and made it 7 cowboys instead of 7 samurai.
Okay.
Defending the village. And who knows, maybe one of the reasons that they haven't received quite the same level is that fact that you can have cowboys that are lawful and evil at the same time.
Right.
Whereas, like, most times in pirates, they're the noble, lawless men. Whereas with this one, cowboys can kind of be... I mean, A Good, Bad, the Ugly is a perfect example because it's 3 rather... None of them are really great. They're all in it for themselves to try to get that money.
Right.
Whereas in the other 2... Clint Eastwood's a little bit more heroic, I would argue. But yeah, and I think the other thing that allows movies or film cowboys to be a thing is they always have really good like music associated with them as well.
Yeah.
It's very, very triumphant, and lots of famous things are coming out of, cowboy movies and things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Any other questions about Cowboys?
I think I'm good.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, one last thing.
Oh, of course.
So Mustangs, horses, which are always considered to be great horses, those tend to be more of a Texas-based affair, and you did have to buck those Broncos to calm them down. There's a name for it. I don't actually know what the name of taming a horse is.
Okay.
But yeah, bucking the Broncos.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and there's other things to talk about as well. I could probably spend a good chunk of time just talking about the OK Corral once I do a little bit more research on it. But I know there's a lot of interesting stuff surrounding that and the type of people they were fighting, things like that. And then it transitioned to be an amazingly corny television program called Winona Earp.
Yeehaw.
So, yeah, where Doc Holliday is still around because he was cursed by an ancient witch.
Ooh.
It's great.
That sounds fantastic.
It's just my level of cheese.
Oh,
so
good.
Yeah. So what do you want to talk about next?
Well, this is going to be a weird transition, but bear with me.
Okay, I will.
Super Mario Odyssey.
What?
I'm wanting to talk. Hold on.
You mean the Italian plumber man?
Yeah, the Italian plumber man in this game gets outfits, and one of the early outfits you get is a cowboy outfit.
Oh.
So it fits.
Perfect.
So
does he have like a little Woody vest?
Oh, totally.
Like a little cowboy hat?
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah.
Does he have a gun?
He might have a holster, but I don't think he actually has a gun. But I'd have to go and double check.
Okay, fair enough.
I'll for the next episode that may or may not be after this, I'll try to bring some or we'll blast it on Twitter.
Okay.
Super Mario Odyssey, that just came out when this episode came out, like 2 weeks, I think now. 2 or 3 weeks. And it is, if you have a Switch, you gotta pick this game up.
Okay.
It is one of the better Mario games I've played in a really long time. Galaxy was kind of the last one that I remember was super amazing.
Okay.
I think from there it kind of teetered, or just kind of plateaued down, where there was like not a lot of heart.
Okay.
In the Mario games, but this one, the polish on this game is fantastic. It plays similar to that of Super Mario Sunshine and Mario 64.
Okay.
Where you kind of have hub worlds. So, like, you know how you'd go into the paintings and you'd get the stars, and there was always, like, a trick to that.
You get the moon.
Yeah, so in this one you get moons.
Okay.
That's
I saw that.
So, yeah, there's these hub worlds, and there's kind of like a small-ish campaign, if you will, like a story to it where, like, oh, you gotta go... So the first big world is the desert. I don't remember what, but the town that's at the start is kind of like a Dia de los Muertos, like the sugar skulls are the denizens and stuff. It's very cute, and you go through there and they're like, oh, the desert's cold. What the fuck happened? How do we fix this? And then Mario's like, I gotta go fix it, because that's his voice now.
That's his voice now?
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty good. I thought Mario was in the room with me for a second. Yeah.
He's secretly behind you. So,
oh gosh.
So you get your standard Mario stuff. You got your triple jump, your wah-woohoo, yippee. You've got your wall jumps. You've got your, you got your ground pound.
You got your Z targeting?
No Z targeting, thank God. However, the new mechanic, because they always kind of try to bring in something new, and it's the hat. Okay. So Mario, at the beginning of the game, it's a big, I guess spoilers, but the game isn't really about the story, so, I'm not going to tell you to go play the game, then come back here. You lose your hat. Your hat gets torn up in a battle with Bowser.
But his hat is his identity.
Right, so hold on, we'll get there.
What?
So you find out that there is a species of people in the Mario universe that are hats.
Oh.
And so you
Why
find
have we never
out
seen
that...
them before?
What?
Why have we never seen them before?
It's very secluded, very secret.
Oh, they're like, oh, okay.
And Bowser found them because he stole a tiara, which is actually a person, for Peach, because Bowser is going to steal a wedding and marry Princess Peach. He's had it with just capturing... They're gonna get married.
Wait, he's gonna steal a wedding?
He's gonna steal a whole wedding.
So he's just gonna roll up in July to some church and
No. So not quite that easy. He wants to make it hard for himself. He's gonna steal every single part of the wedding from different people and then make his own wedding.
But that's gonna be an aesthetic disaster, though.
Well, you know what? It just so happens he knows just the right stuff to steal.
Oh.
To make his perfect wedding.
So are you on a timer then?
No, there's no. I mean, technically there is, but it's a video game.
Oh, so because it would be hilarious if you spent all your time in Desert World 1 collecting all the collectible shit.
It's too late.
And then you get to World 2 and Bowser's like, all right, I married Peach, and it's like, oh, you lost the game. Sorry, dude. You shouldn't have been fucking around in the desert all that time.
Right. No, there's definitely no sense of urgency there. A lot of the game is spent collecting moons.
Okay.
And so what happens is every world has, gosh, I think it's like 20, 30 moons.
That's a lot of moons.
You only need about 10 to 15 to leave. So, like, you don't have to go and collect every single moon.
Okay.
And some of them you can't get right away. Like, you have to complete the little story where Mario goes and fights one of the mini boss. So, like, you know how he typically either has, like, the Koopa Kids or something like that? Well,
sure.
He has a new enemy to hang out with him, and it's his, shit, what is that called?
It's his Koopa mother-in-law.
No, it's actually a...
Peach is like,
it's his wedding organizing party.
Oh,
and they're all bunnies. And I forget their name.
Are they evil bunnies?
They're evil bunnies with hats.
Oh, man.
And they typically throw their hats at you.
Why?
Because this is a hat-themed game. It's all about hats now. It's all about hats.
What?
It's a Mario game. You don't have to think about it too hard.
Does he still go through pipes, though?
Yeah. Definitely goes through pipes.
Okay. God, why do they build the whole mechanic around hats?
You know, but, okay, so normally I would agree with you. But the thing you can do it, so normally you can, like, bonk enemies and, like, defeat them with the hat by throwing it forward. So it's kind of like a ranged attack. However, you can throw the hat onto certain enemies and become them. And you get their characteristics.
Like Kirby?
Kind of like Kirby.
What?
Yeah, so like a Bullet Bill's coming at you, you throw your hat on Bullet Bill and you become the Bullet Bill. And you can fly around like a bullet.
What?
Yeah.
What? That's horrifying.
And they actually go into, like, kind of a weird, like... They get a little too deep on the first time you do that, because you do it with a frog.
What? Well, okay, but he was a frog in Mario 3.
Right, but, like, he turns into, like, a tiny little frog. And then you use the frog's powers to get to the next place. It's all very fun.
Sounds like body horror.
Yeah, you don't want to think about that too much. There's a lot of body horror in this game.
Oh, God.
You can turn into a T-Rex, which is kind of fun.
Does it, like, have his, like, face on it?
It's got his mustache.
Oh, God. Oh, God.
And it typically has the red hat.
And, wait. So you throw the hat on the enemy.
Yeah.
And then Mario transforms into that
He
enemy.
basically he goes into that enemy, becomes them, and then you basically play as them until you either take yourself out of the situation or die.
Okay, so that's a way better than what I thought you were gonna say, which is like he throws a hat and then it's like Mario's like lifeless body is standing there with his like eyes like rolled back in his head. He's just like, oh, it's like he's just like, I'm a bullet bill now. Man, that was Mario. It's a good Mario.
No, he jumps into him, kind of like Honey, I Shrunk the Kid style.
That's horrifying.
It's amazing.
Can you play as Luigi? My favorite character? My favorite Mario character?
As far as I know, granted, I'm not I mean, I would say I'm a decent way in.
Okay.
You can't necessarily play as him. However, I have the Luigi amiibo.
Oh, okay.
And so they do some, like, you can put the amiibo on the controller. And in the game, the amiibos help you find moons. Like, they give you little hints, like, oh, go here. And, okay. So.
This is the Luigi amiibo.
Oh, so yeah, I put the Luigi amiibo on the controller, and the game actually gives me Luigi's outfit. So I can run around in his clothes, but I can't necessarily be him.
That's monstrous.
I know.
Why are you taking away everything from Luigi?
Because, you know,
it was
Nintendo hates the Luigi.
It was like the year of Luigi like 2 years ago. How quickly we forget.
You know, I'm going to be real. They didn't in my personal opinion, they did not do a good job with the year of Luigi.
It was the best year in American history. Also, is Mario not a plumber anymore? I heard this rumor.
So, I don't know. They don't ever mention it in the stuff.
Uh-huh.
But I think you're left to assume that after his first dip into the Mushroom Kingdom via warp pipe in some New Yorker's bathtub, that he is no longer a plumber after that point.
I believe you mean New Donk City.
That's actually one of my favorite levels, to be honest with you.
Cool.
It's got that like really like old fashioned New York vibe where like everyone's in like fucking suits and like fedoras and stuff like that, like kind of your mob 20s.
Now, serious question for you.
Yeah.
Is it, like, very jarring to see cartoony Mario running around, like, a real city with real people?
So, that was definitely... So, in the first, like, real level you go to, so they give you, like, an introduction world, and then you go to that desert place, and that's where the game really starts.
Uh-huh.
You do eventually see a real human, and yeah, it is incredibly jarring.
Okay.
Because they're all easily 2/3 bigger than he is.
Okay.
They are thinner, and they look like people. So like I have to wonder, is Mario a dwarf?
I don't know.
Or maybe like a gnome or some kind of fantasy creature.
Or is he from like another reality?
I mean, that would... Yeah, so the pipes are actually portals to other dimensions, and he's just from an area that...
Another dimension.
Another dimension.
And then, so on like a scale of like Kingdom Hearts to like Sonic 06.
Oh no.
How weird is it?
How weird is the game?
Or just the... What's the word I'm looking for?
Oh, it's definitely Sonic 06. If it's like... If you're gauging like when Sonic is in that real ass town with like real people, and he's just like, haha, chili dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's jarring as fuck.
Okay. Not to suggest that, you know, like I guess in Final or Kingdom Hearts, like everyone does look a little anime.
Well, yeah, everyone kind of has that Final Fantasy anime vibe.
Sure.
Even though Sora often is like over the top with like his outfit.
Sure.
Especially when you get into the later games.
So I guess it's not super weird to see him interacting with like
other anime people.
Disney characters.
Yeah, they do. So, and I don't necessarily want to hold on this too long, but they kind of write it off in Kingdom Hearts that like these are other dimensions, and like
okay,
and so like the Disney worlds are their own dimensions. So like, yes, you are definitely a stranger.
In a strange land.
Okay. Situation. Especially when you're like... Because I think one of the first worlds that they show you outside of like the little world that Sora's from is like King Mickey's castle, and it's like got all of like the classic Disney characters like Donald Duck, Goofy, Minnie, Mickey...
Horace?
Sure.
Horace the horse?
Maybe.
I don't know Horace the horse.
Okay, so I know who you said after you said the horse, but I didn't remember his first name.
And then there's like Bessie the cow, I think. Anyway.
Yeah. So
yeah, anyway, back to Mario.
So, Super Mario Odyssey, it is a fantastic game. There was a lot of love put into this game.
Nice.
It is worth if you have a Switch or you're on the fence about getting a Switch because there was just not enough games. I think Zelda, Mario Odyssey, and the handful of others that are out there, definitely worth the purchase because Mario Odyssey is just such a good game. You're gonna do a disservice to yourself if you don't play this game.
Aren't they about to put Skyrim on the Switch, or am I going insane?
No, Bethesda wants to put Skyrim on literally everything. I wouldn't be surprised if the next TI calculator has a version of Skyrim on it.
That would be so rad.
I would be really happy if I was in like high school and they're like, here's your TI 10,000 calculator. Oh, you can put Skyrim on that. I would actually be I would have done really bad in math.
Okay, fair enough. But yeah. So shall we transition into our little middle section?
Yeah, absolutely.
Whatever we're calling it.
Yeah.
I guess at this point it's the publicity center.
Yeah, it's the please help us section.
So please help us. All right.
So we're keeping that part in. Yes. I'm sorry for everyone who hates it. So yeah, right now, in this current early stage of the podcast, we would love to hear from you guys. We've got our Twitter up. Our Facebook page is going to come up soon. Shortly. Yeah. We've got our website, www.fandomroulette.com. If you want updates on what we're doing, when episodes are up.
Cool.
Definitely check that out. We are on iTunes, so if you search us at Fandom Roulette, you can find all of our episodes there if you'd like to download it there.
Please subscribe.
Yes.
Please download.
Yes.
And please write reviews.
Yes, definitely write reviews. That'll help us.
Those are 3 things that kind of like help us move up that ladder.
Yeah.
And, hopefully we'll be getting up ladders sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
And then, who knows, maybe this becomes something a little bit bigger.
Right.
Than us. And then you can hear us talking about internet companies and things like that.
Ooh, yes. Definitely sponsored ads and things like that.
Sure,
in the future.
Yeah. We'll get there.
If you want to get in on the conversation, you want us to talk about stuff, if you...
I know tell us how wrong we are.
Well, I mean, you can try to avoid that if you can. But if you want to jump in on the conversation, because I would love to do sections where we answer questions from stuff that we've talked about before, or things we just haven't gotten to yet, and maybe give us suggestions on the next topics that we'll tackle. You can find us on Fandom _podcast. That's our Twitter handle. And then you can email us personally at fanbroulettepodcast@gmail.com.
Woohoo.
Yeah.
And we'll listen to those. We'll answer questions. We'll try to get back in contact with you as soon as possible, or we might talk about it on the podcast. Who knows?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just like a little bit of housekeeping stuff. Who knows? Maybe as we start rolling out a little bit more, we'll start thanking people who are helping to spread the good news.
Oh,
things
for sure.
like that. But yeah, so thanks for listening to this little middle section, and we're gonna go back to that content. Content.
Okay, so jumping from the completely almost seemingly random topic of Mario Odyssey,
because there was a cowboy that one time.
Yeah, I was a cowboy for about an hour in that game.
Whoa, so a lot of hour.
Yeah, so moving on to probably my favorite little bit that we do. Let's talk about role playing games a little bit.
Hooray! So, Cody, is there just like a really solid Old West role playing system out there in the world?
Yes, actually there is. I'm
being facetious.
So I've watched people play this system online, like via YouTube and stuff like that. But there is a system called Dogs in the Vineyard, which has a very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's got a Wild West vibe to it.
Okay.
You actually kind of combat or encounters, and they could be things that are not necessarily like you pull a gun on somebody and there's a shootout, but it could just be like you need to get information out of somebody, and so this kind of encounter system. And the way it works is it kind of plays a little like dice mixed with poker. And so you roll your dice, and so does the dungeon master or the game master, and basically they spend a couple rounds like adding more numbers to their hand.
Okay.
And I think the caveat is that the game master and the player don't see each other's hands.
Oh.
So it's kind of this bluffing game. So I think it works really well in person, but when I saw it online, it was a little weird.
So does it reward social lying?
Yes. I know, right? I haven't played it much myself, but I definitely want to read more about it. But that's kind of the only system that I know personally that kind of hits that cowboy vibe.
Okay.
But I've always been a fan of kind of making the systems that you have and you love work for you.
Sure.
So I like to reflavor. I'm working with a friend of mine from work on a certain style of kind of foreign land, spacey kind of vibe, and we're going to use the 5th edition module to kind of use the system, because I think it does what we want to do. But we have to do... I mean, you're not supposed to hear this, but I'm saying it for the podcast because it makes sense.
Okay.
So you'll have to forget about this later. He's got his ears closed. So yeah, we're working on reflavoring D&D 5th to have a kind of outer world space vibe for it.
Okay.
So different, just like a different planet. It's not Earth. You're not going to find typical birds and tigers and things. Like, you're going to find like weird space animals and societies very different.
Are you reflavoring races and
yes.
stuff as well?
Okay. I think we haven't put a whole lot of work into it, but we've been working on reflavoring the races, the items, how magic works. how everything works. I don't... It's a very long process, like, because we're going to have to reflavor basically everything.
Oh, that's a lot of work.
But mechanically, the game works. Like, D&D 5th edition is a good set, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
But right now, like, and for fledgling dungeon masters and game masters, I think this is a good exercise in world building. Is creating a kind of Wild West vibe in the system that you want to use. Because I know D&D, that would be super easy. 5th edition, like...
I would say so.
You know, I think the only thing that I might do is replace some of the ranged weapons with, like, you know, your kind of your 6-shooters or your, you know, your, God, what is that? The pullback rifles and things like that, where you gotta, like, kind of cock the handle or whatever.
There's a name for those, and I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I forget too.
Shotguns.
Yeah, shotguns, things like that.
What would a shotgun be?
Probably like a heavy crossbow.
Maybe. Or you could give them like the thunder gun. Both have thunder damage.
Yeah, that could work too. I know there is a... Matthew Mercer has a gunslinger class that he made.
That's right, because Percy is a gunslinger.
Yes, for those who are big on Critical Role, there is a gunslinger class out there that is pretty good from what I've seen. Like, it doesn't seem really game-breaking or anything like that. Mechanically, I think it's a little more involved than...
Okay.
Like, if you're looking for, like, an easy gunslinger class where you can just... and very little mechanics, like, probably not your bag.
Sure.
Because I think there's a lot of things like misfires and reloading and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's always the thing that has kind of concerned me about, like, Western setting RPGs, especially if you want to, like, be accurate with it. It's like, you know, well, I guess at that point during the Old West, guns were a lot more accurate because you had rifled barrels.
Right.
But yeah, no, just the concept of, like, reload times and things like that have always kind of concerned me.
Yeah.
As a person who likes to keep my boys alive.
Also, another good system that would probably work really well with kind of the cowboy Wild West vibe would be Blades in the Dark.
Okay.
Like,
I could see that.
Like, I mean, granted, you're playing on the other side of that spectrum. You'd probably be like banditos in a Wild West town. It'd be easy. I think it would be easy to reflavor it.
Sure. And then, if I recall correctly, I know GURPS had an expansion for the Wild West, which makes sense.
GURPS had a lot of expansions for everything.
Because that was its whole bag,
right.
Was it could be whatever you wanted it to be, no matter what. But yeah, so let's build a world.
Sure.
Real quick.
Yeah.
So, we wanted to have a Western flavor.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the question right off the bat is, does everyone have to be human?
No, I don't see the need for that.
Okay.
To me, it doesn't, like... I would love to play in a D&D world where it was the Wild West, but just with all the different fantasy races.
You know, I've always personally really wanted to, like, play a system that's, like, standard fantasy setting, but, like, the world has just progressed. Because it's, like a noir detective story, but, like, you're, like, a dwarf living in an apartment in the big city. You know? Because, you know, I think it's just...
And I think Shadowrunner is a close...
The sounds of it, yeah, it's kind of like a cyberpunk.
It's a little further ahead than probably what you were expecting, but yeah, that'd be fun.
Well, but like, you know what I mean? Where it's just, like, this concept of, like, if you have elves and dwarves and trolls, like... Clearly, everyone's wearing chainmail and, like, having broadswords and things like that.
Right.
It's like, I would really much like to experience a fantasy world where, like, the world has continued to progress over time. Like, I had the realization a couple of years ago at this point, as a little diversion tangent, like, in the Lord of the Rings, like, you could probably go to Minas Tirith National Park, and, like, they would have, like, tours of, like, the Battle of the Pelennor Field, and you could see, like, where, like, the Rohan charge happened and things like that.
Right.
And, like, you'd have, like, the little audio tours and things like that. Because, like, it's weird to think that, like, their culture would just stop advancing at that point. Like,
yeah, I don't think it would. I think we're just... I think it's hard for people to...
It's hard to imagine it, yeah. But I'd very much like to have a world where you have, like... You know, your standard fantasy stuff, but it not be medieval
right.
Europe.
I think it would be easy to I think it would be easy to reflavor certain mechanics in
Sure.
D&D to do that. It would just take some time.
What about Magic?
I mean, I think a world could... I mean, it would evolve differently, but, I mean, we evolved pretty drastically with electricity and the Industrial Revolution. So,
sure.
like, there probably would have been, like, a magic revolution where we started using magic for things. So instead of, figuring out how electricity worked the way we know it today, we would have just used spells that incurred the lightning effect.
Okay.
So little differences, but I think it would have naturally went to certain areas. I think industry would have been changed because you would need people because they could make fire, and there would be like the working class mage,
sure,
who would have to I got to go to the coal mine so I can heat up the earth or heat up the resources or whatever to move forward. I don't know if coal mining was the greatest one, but what the step after that, manufacturing and things
sure.
like that.
And then, I guess too, I would think if you'd have to talk to your party beforehand.
Oh, for sure.
Things. But if they wanted to be cowboys, I would highly recommend them to look at Ranger as a good class. I feel like Ranger would be the easiest to reflavor for a cowboy-ish class.
Sure.
The Rangers always felt kind of cowboy-y.
Yeah, they're like the fantasy cowboys.
They're good at tracking, and they're good at shooting.
Sure.
They have a little bit of magic.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so, let's see.
I mean, we could go on forever, but I think the idea or world building is, at least in this situation, for a Wild West, it's just the theme, you you want kind of that openness of, there's not some big huge town. But there's definitely there's small town, lots of outside forces.
Sure.
Definitely just the feeling of isolation. For that town, you can't just go to the local authority because it's the sheriff, and he might be able to deal with one person, but if there's a group of bandits coming to raid the town, he might not have the resources at hand.
For sure.
So it's just kind of creating encounters and situations based on those flavors of the Wild West, and just instead of you're in a rolling plain, or maybe it's the desert, to really get that Wild West vibe going on.
For sure.
But yeah,
that's good.
Yeah.
And moving on to the last one, we're going to be talking a little bit about a more modern Western thing, which is Westworld, and we're going to say right now, spoilers!
Oh yeah, this is definitely a spoiler situation.
Yeah, so if you've not watched the first season of Westworld, I would recommend turning this off right now and coming back when you're done watching it, because it's really hard to talk about Westworld without talking about spoilers, I would argue. But yeah, so fun fact, Westworld is actually based on a movie that was made in the 70s that was written by Michael Crichton.
Okay.
The guy who wrote Jurassic Park. It was one of his very first writing credits, if memory serves correctly. And it's very clear that Michael Crichton had sort of an obsession with the Disneyfication of certain things, if you ask me. Because he has two major stories where you have a theme park where the extraordinary becomes ordinary, and where things go desperately wrong because technology is running amok.
Yeah.
And so in Westworld, it's a sort of amusement park / MMO RPG with rules that I could never quite figure out / vacation experience.
Yeah, it is a high-end vacation experience.
It's a high-end vacation experience where you basically go to this recreation of the Old West, where you have robots, which they had a special name for that I'm forgetting now.
Hosts?
Hosts, yes. Thank you. And hosts ranged from, you had saloon owners, and you had bandits, and you had cowboys, and you had prostitutes, and you had...
normal civilians.
Normal civilians, clergy, and things like that. And basically, you could go into Westworld, and you could do whatever you want without repercussions, because they're robots.
Right.
So, if you just wanted to go to the town and drink a lot of whiskey and play a lot of poker and have sex with lots of prostitutes,
that was a thing you could do.
Cool. Feels like a waste of a vacation.
Sure.
But cool. But if you wanted to go and you wanted to ride on horseback, and you wanted to go and bust the banditos and help the sheriff and things like that, that was also a thing you could do.
Yeah, and there were also, if memory serves me right, there were 2 towns. There was the one that you entered in, which was a very standard outpost, but then they also had like a kind of a recreation of like a, what was it? It was like a Spanish outpost.
Yeah.
Like kind of south of that initial area, and that was like a place you could go and hang out at as well.
Well, and then the other thing too was the further away you got from that central city, the more difficult and dangerous things became. Mm-hmm. So, like, there's children who go to Westworld for whatever reason, and, like, basically, like, you're not allowed, like, you can't go much further than, like, the first little river. Because once you get past the river, that's when things start becoming a little bit more difficult and a little bit more dangerous. But there's a couple of things that are important to remember, which is that you can shoot hosts and you can kill hosts, but hosts can't kill you.
And they can't harm you either.
They can't, yeah. So if they try to, they get remotely shut off. And basically, if you're in like a gunfight with another person, and they shoot you, I guess it's described as like maybe like getting hit with like an airsoft pellet.
Yeah, they're not real guns, but they make it look pretty real for the host to get shot.
For sure. And there's like this whole team of people that are kind of like observing, who like monitor and like actions that you're taking and things like that. Although there's not much you can't do in Westworld from the sounds of it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of messed up. But yeah, so our story kind of is crazy.
Yeah, the story revolves around a few people.
Yes.
There are definitely main characters, like plural.
Sure.
Dolores, who is one of the hosts.
Yes.
Which is a kind of southern, like a daughter of a southern farmhand.
Yes,
she slowly throughout the show starts to realize that Westworld isn't real.
Yes, and
starts to kind of grow resentment towards her human creators and things like that.
You have Maeve, who is like the madame of the brothel,
top prostitute, if you will.
She's the top prostitute, and her story is very similar to Dolores's, except kind of like on speed, if you will.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, Maeve starts remembering every time she is like reset.
Yeah. So for her, it's like every time she gets murdered.
Yeah. So every time she gets
really
murdered,
horrific.
She remembers it, and then when you get murdered, they go and they fix you up. And then you're reintroduced to the story. And she can, like, point out, like, where she was killed the last time and things like that. You have Bernard, who is the main programmer of Westworld, who starts realizing that all is not what it seems. And
super spoilers, because this is the kind of the big drop.
Yeah, he's the host.
Yeah, find out.
He's the host of the other person we're just about to talk about. His partner from when they're building Westworld.
Right.
And that other person is Dr. Robert Ford, who is played masterfully and brilliantly by Anthony Hopkins, because everything that man touches turns to gold. I'm convinced of it. He's one of those actors that can ascend anything he's in.
Yeah, I mean he does a bang up job being a kind of what they wanted to do for him. He's the owner of the company, but he's still heavily involved in kind of the inner workings of the park.
Yes.
And he's kind of this almost reclusive, like, borderline madman.
Yeah. And the other thing, too, is higher-ups in the organization are also trying to, like, squeeze him out.
Yeah, people are trying to overthrow him because he's kind of kicking his feet on... it's your standard theme park thing. You want to make more money by upping the ante, and he was very much like... This whole place is just upping the ante. God, I can't talk today.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean.
Yeah, for sure.
He's very much like Westworld doesn't need all these, stories and tricks to make it better. It's already, like, good as is. Mm-hmm. And so people are trying to kick him out.
You have Jimmy Simpson, who is most notably for playing Liam McPoyle, and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And I always feel bad about that because Jimmy Simpson's a really good actor who has kind of been typecast to be a McPoyle, which is just like a weird thing. But William is a young, idealistic man who is about to marry rich and more or less inherit, like, his future wife's father's tech company, basically.
Yeah.
And his future brother-in-law takes him to Westworld to find out what kind of man he really is. And he's, trying very hard to be a good person. He initially chooses a white hat. He falls in love with Dolores at first sight.
Yeah.
And everything he's doing is trying to help Dolores.
Right.
Help Dolores out. And then, kind of rounding out the cast, you have Ed Harris, who plays the Man in Black, who is a horrible, ruthless, sadistic bastard.
Yeah.
Who kind of revels in killing. He revels in torture. And the thing he's looking for is he's looking for the center of the maze that Ford keeps talking about, because he's convinced that at the center of the maze he's going to find something that he's never experienced in Westworld before, which is true peril.
Right.
He's heard a rumor that there's another level in Westworld, and once you reach that level, then you can, in theory, die.
Which he's super jazzed about for some reason.
Because he's sick and tired of just doing whatever he wants without consequence, I think.
Yeah, I guess because they say in the show that he kind of goes there weekly.
Yeah,
or he's just always there because he just has so much money.
He's there very frequently because he has so much money, and also it's kind of implied too that a lot of oversight has been taken away from him, because there's I think if I remember correctly, there's a scene where he's really brutalizing a host, and they're like, we noticed a person is really. And the guy looks and goes, "Oh, that's the Man in Black. It's fine."
Yeah, no, he's good.
He can basically do whatever he wants here. And
should we reveal that big twist?
Should
we? Man in Black?
Sure, because I think it's one of the most brilliant and well executed twists on television.
Oh, for sure.
So it's revealed that the way that a host's mind works, they're not really able to differentiate temporally. So it's everything is just kind of one big memory. Mm-hmm. And so Dolores, one of the things she's looking for is William, and it turns out that William is the Man in Black in the past.
Right.
And so
every scene with him is expertly shot. As it's through the show, you think it's all happening at the same time.
At the same time, yeah.
But you find out that when William is on screen, it's actually in the past, and when the Man in Black is on scene, it is the present.
It is in the present. And actually, it's fun because I was watching that show week to week, and I was going on to various fan communities talking about it, and people were starting to actually figure it out.
Okay.
And props to the showrunners for being very happy about it. Because I always have this theory that it's people guess big twists that are going to happen, and then the creator is no, it's not that. And I think a good example of that in recent memory was that Red Hulk in the comic. Everyone was like, "Oh, is it Bruce Banner's best friend?" Whose his name I'm blanking on now.
I actually am not familiar with the Hulk franchise, so I'm
is
able
it
to help you with that.
Is it his best friend?
But
yeah,
to while you're looking that up, I
sure.
mean, it's I guess from what you're saying is that the showrunners and the people who were putting this show out weekly were super happy with the community kind of coming together and kind of noticing the little nuances. Because I think if I was creating a show, if I was part of that situation, and we were kind of slowly hinting things via certain mild conversations, just
Rick Jones.
Oh, Rick Jones. Okay.
Yeah. So they find out about it. And so the guy who was writing the comic was like, no. And he changed who it was actually going to be. And it didn't make a lick of sense.
Oh, that's...
Who it ended up being, the reveal was.
You should be happy that your community is trying to, slowly...
I think one of the cool... Oh, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, my example is, in our current campaign, where I'm the Dungeon Master and you are the player, I'm actually dropping... I've been dropping hints for the past 6... sessions about what's going to happen at the end of the game,
and I probably don't know what it is.
I mean, I don't think there's enough information there, but I would hope that before the ending happens, that you guys have a pretty good idea of what's actually going on in the world and that stuff. That to me, I'd be super happy if you guys came together, thought oh, what has Cody said in the past couple sessions that would make us believe this.
Sure. And I think too, like you're saying, I think it's just really cool to have those things figured out, because I was also talking about it with a friend as we were going along, and the one episode ends and William's saying stuff, and he's like, everything he's saying kind of sounds Man in Blacky, and I was like, no, you're right, and there were other things throughout too,
I don't think I figured it out, or I don't think I made that connection until the episode before they.
Okay.
Because I was just so enthralled with that universe.
Sure.
And I'm not gonna lie. At first, I wasn't super into William's story.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of like, oh boy, this is, and then it ends up being my, one of my favorite parts of Westworld is that I love a good story where the good guy turns completely dark.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then, too, you also get the feeling, I think one of the, yeah, and it was just a really cool twist. And then, I guess the other big shoe drop from season 1 is, and this is something that, the producers and such have said, is if you think about it, season 1 was a lengthy prequel, basically. It's now they can start telling the story they want to tell, which is the robots have revolted, or rather they have been sort of given sentience, and the robots are now revolting. Because Anthony Hopkins at the end reveals that basically the maze was the robots gaining sentience, and they're now remembering every horrible thing that humans have done with them, and they're going to start revolting and killing people and taking over the world.
Right.
And so, Maeve is trying to escape, but maybe not. Dolores and her sort of beau, Teddy, are now murdering people, and the Man in Black is very excited.
Oh, he's totally
because
pumped.
Now he can potentially die, which, like you said, is kind of a weird thing. And then a couple things that I would be really excited to see in season 2. There was brief mentions at the end that there are other worlds.
Yeah.
There's potentially a samurai world. There's potentially a pirate world. I think there was either a sequel made or a sequel that was in talks made of the original film that was going to be called Future World.
Okay.
Which is
yeah,
like a cyberpunk future.
Yeah.
So literally, I think it would be really, really neat and a lot of fun to kind of either see, are these other worlds gaining sentience as well, and it would be really fun to see Dolores riding a horse through samurai world and riding past pagodas and the guys in those very cheesy samurai costumes and things like that.
I'd also be interested for season 2 to see more of, because you see in the show they show you very little of what the outside of Westworld looks like the actual building itself that it's all housed in.
Yes.
So I don't know if it's a skyscraper that is 2,000 feet tall. Well, that's probably really low, but 2,000 stories. So I think.
Sure. Yeah.
Or is it this big compound similar to Jurassic Park, where the different sections?
Is it on its own island?
Right. So I would actually be curious to see what the outside world looks like, and how on top of seeing the other worlds and stuff. I'd like to see what the compound looks like, because all you see are, I think, the floor where they kind of do the repairing for the hosts, and then you see a couple of minor rooms
you've seen the main security hub.
Yeah, the main security hub.
You see the defunct robot office,
right? Where all the
warehouse
done hosts are,
and then you see Westworld itself. One of the other things I'd like to talk about really briefly is the sort of aesthetic designs of it.
Yeah,
because when you're in Westworld, everything is super bright. Everything is rather colorful, beautiful shots of valleys and mountains and hills and things like that.
Yeah. Beautiful
costumes. And then everything in the other side, it's very dark, low fluorescent lighting. Everything's very drab. And this is something I kind of noticed as I was watching it. I was discussing it with a couple of people. I feel like nudity in that show is trying really hard to sort of be the anti-Game of Thrones.
Being as I've never seen Game of Thrones, describe to me what you mean by that.
I will explain. So Game of Thrones sort of created and normalized this idea of quote-unquote sex position.
Okay.
Which is characters will be, like, giving, like, lengthy backstories about something or explaining things while there's, like, a pair of tits on the screen.
Okay.
Like,
okay.
It'll either be...
I'm having deja vu. Have we talked about this already?
It's possible.
Okay. I think I know what you're talking about, though. Like, I've been rekindled. So I guess now describe to me, because I'm trying to think right now, because Westworld, I watched Westworld a little bit ago, so it's not super fresh in my mind. But I'm trying to, I don't think they did any of, like, the sex position.
Exactly.
If there was nudity, it was...
The only time you ever see full nudity is when they are in the floor where they do the repairs, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, like, when you're in Westworld, like, the prostitutes are in, like, lingerie and things like that, but you never truly see the hosts, like, naked inside of Westworld. You only see them...
What about that scene where William and his buddy were with the two prostitutes with the bath? Weren't they all naked in that scene?
Oh, there was that orgy scene, you're right.
Yeah.
But... Okay,
there's one, but there wasn't any exposition there.
Yeah, well, I guess what I'm going for is, like, every time you really... Most of the nudity, then, I guess, not all of it, but a lot of it was when they're getting repaired, and it kind of sells, like, the fact, like, the commodification of these things. Like, it was always shot very flat, very sterile, and very, like, it was incredibly non-sexualized.
Right. They were almost like, hosts. They were objects rather than, like, you weren't staring at boobs or a penis. You were staring at, the penis on almost like an action figure.
And then there's that scene very early on where, like, it's two male, like, repairmen working on a male host, and they put a blanket on it. And Ford freaks out, and he's like, as soon as you see this as anything other than a robot, that's when we start, like, failing or whatever. Like, This is a machine, this is a commodity, things like that. And I just think it's really interesting because it's like, they tried, at least in my opinion, it looked like they were trying very hard to, like, really non-sexualize the nudity, which I thought was interesting.
Well, and also, even in the scene that I mentioned where that wasn't necessarily the case, I think that was setting the tone, because I think at that point we hadn't seen a lot of, like, the things you could do in Westworld yet, because it's a pretty early scene. And I think it was, like, and there wasn't a whole lot of, like, let me talk about our dark past together, or let me push the scene further via story and, your sex position. It was basically just a scene to remind you that, like, oh, this is a thing you can do in Westworld. And I don't think they do much of it after that. Like, it's not something they go back to, and they, like, it's not like every episode is like, oh, we need to go show that bath orgy scene again. Which I think was it had your shock value or whatever, because, there's naked people.
Sure.
But it's also... It had a point. It wasn't just, like, pure nonsense.
Yeah.
It was setting a scene. So I think in that case, even though it wasn't kind of objectifying the nudity to a point where it's not sexual, like, it served a purpose. Where I feel like, from what I've heard anyways about Game of Thrones, that sometimes the sexual, like, there's, like, almost no point to having some of those scenes. Yeah.
And I just thought it was really interesting because I feel it's another HBO show.
Yeah.
And I feel in a lot of ways it was trying to, like, kind of distance and or change how that particular model of storytelling, which I appreciated because it kind of got a little extreme.
Yeah, it definitely, from what I've heard, gets pretty intense.
Yeah.
And I think that wraps up this episode.
Sure. Well, the last thing we'll talk about is nudity and storytelling.
Yeah, sorry, friends and family who don't want to hear us talk about boobs and penises and stuff.
Yeah.
Oops.
But yeah, so thank you for listening to this episode of Fandom Roulette. Our first pass at a more thematic episode versus what we have been doing, which, I'm kind of enjoying.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it as well. It's a nice, well-balanced cast.
Yes, I would agree with that. All right, so thank you for listening. Follow us in all that section stuff we talked about in the middle section.
Right.
And signing off, I'm Joe.
And I'm Cody.
And as always, stay nerdy.
Stay super nerdy.